The psychedelic renaissance has a diversity problem. Recent reviews have shown that research participants in psychedelic studies are overwhelmingly white. So are the researchers, and so are the better-known heroes of the movement. This is something that Ifetayo Harvey, founder of the People of Color Psychedelic Collective, is well aware of. She noticed it at the beginning of her career while working for the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, a prominent leader in psychedelic research.
During our staff retreat, there was the clinical team giving an overview of their work, and they had a slide that was talking about the demographics of a study that they did, and it was 90% white. And when someone asked about why that was, they said, "Oh, it just happened that way." So I was the only Black person in the room, so I was I want to say something, but also I was pretty new to the organization then. That was my first time meeting everyone.
It was experiences like that which prompted her to publish an article titled, "Why Are Psychedelics So White?" in 2016, where she says,
"In the psychedelic community, people will talk about the unfairness of the drug war and how it violates people's autonomy, but they refuse to name racism, ignoring the biggest elephant in the room. By failing to make the implicit explicit, the psychedelic movement excludes people of color, especially Black people, from having their voices heard."
After publishing the piece, other people concerned about this began reaching out to her, and the POC Psychedelic Collective was born.
We are an organization that focuses on education and community building for people of color interested in psychedelics and ending the war on drugs. What sets us apart is that we are a POC intentional space. There aren't many groups like that in the psychedelic field, unfortunately. And we also bring a social justice framework to our voice, our work, our programming, and that's something we're starting to see, but a lot of it's posturing, if I'm being honest.
There are many reasons why the psychedelic community seems so white. Since its inception, the war on drugs has disproportionately targeted and imprisoned people of color. Throughout history, the biomedical industry has conducted unethical research on Black people, potentially leading to distrust among POC attending a psychedelic trial. And most importantly, historical racism has led to huge disparities in healthcare among BIPOC people.
There is a kind of I don't want to say a divide, but almost two trajectories in the psychedelic field, one being the more clinical, medical, and the other being the more community, grassroots. And because of lack of healthcare affordability and medical racism, scientific racism, I think a lot of people of color tend to be on the side of community, grassroots-led initiatives. I think there has been a lack of investment and lack of structure in the field for those grassroots and community-led organizations and leaders of color in this space.
The irony present in white Westerners leading the psychedelic renaissance is obvious when you think about how indigenous peoples have stewarded these medicines for millennia. It's obvious when you read about how Silicon Valley workers now attend ketamine retreats for productivity, while just a few years ago, Elijah McClain, an unarmed Black man, was killed after paramedics injected him with a lethal dose. It's even obvious in my own master's documentary project. This is why Ifetayo is critical of medicinal psychedelic hype, which often fails to address the much more obvious reasons people are suffering.
I think sometimes there's a tendency for people to try to sell psychedelics in the media. Something that bothers me about that is, especially when we talk about mental health care, there's not a conversation about why our mental health care system exists as it is. Our society, because of capitalism, individualism, is not built around care. It's built around capital, money, resources. And when that is how the world is, we're just gonna see people looking for ways to escape their conditions. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not a solution.
Ifetayo's life has been shaped by the war on drugs. Her father was arrested for trafficking when she was just 4 years old and then deported upon his release. However, she has turned her story into a force for change, raising awareness about the war on drugs while building a community that advocates for a psychedelic renaissance rooted in justice and inclusion.
We cannot heal under the direction of whiteness. And I say we as in Black people. We carry some of the heaviest intergenerational trauma in this country because of enslavement. And the pain and trauma and torture that my ancestors endured didn't just disappear into thin air when they perished. Instead, it was passed on and compounded by today's systemic racism and other forms of oppression. Conducting a study focused on trauma where the majority of the participants are white in the United States, a country whose foundation rests on the trauma of Black and Indigenous people, symbolizes the future of the psychedelic movement if we do not act.